Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Hidden Life of Ice, Dispatches from a Disappearing World, by Marco Tedesco, with Alberto Flores d'Arcais. Foreword by Elizabeth Colbert. Narrated by Joel Richards. Foreword by Elizabeth Colbert. I visited Greenland for the first time in the spring of 2001. I'd recently read a book about the Greenland ice sheet and the millennia of climate information frozen into its 2 miles deep expanse. Scientists were attempting to drill to the bottom of the ice sheet to get at snow that had fallen 130,000 years ago, before the start of the last ice age. The project struck me as, forgive the pun, unbelievably cool. As a journalist, of course, I decided to write about it. It turned out that the New York Air National Guard, which services scientific expeditions to Greenland, also occasionally takes reporters. I wrangled a seat on the next available flight. 20 years later, I can still vividly remember landing in Kangerlussuaq, on the island's west coast. Several musk oxen were grazing by the airport. The following day, I took a ski-equipped C-130 to the drilling operation at the top of the ice sheet. I was hooked. Greenland, the artist Rockwell Kent wrote, after being shipwrecked in an ice fjord. Oh, God, how beautiful the world can be. Since then, I have made 2 more trips to Greenland, and each time I've been fortunate enough to get back onto the ice sheet. The experience has always been amazing, as close as a person can get to visiting another planet. But the reason I keep going back, aside from the fantastic beauty of the place, is the extraordinary significance Greenland has for life on this planet, which is the only one we're likely to be granted. As Marco Tedesco explains in the chapters that follow, the Greenland ice sheet plays an oversized role in life on Earth, particularly when it comes to global sea levels. The ice sheet is a holdover from the last ice age, when mile-high glaciers extended over vast stretches of the northern hemisphere. In most places, Canada, Scandinavia, New England, the upper Midwest, the ice melted away about 10,000 years ago. In Greenland, it has so far persisted. But there are many signs that Tedesco and his colleagues are monitoring, that this is changing. Greenland is losing ice, and the rate at which this is happening is accelerating. Were the entire ice sheet to melt away, global sea levels would rise by 20 feet, and most major coastal cities would be inundated. The process could take centuries to fully play out, but in the meantime, sea levels would rise by several inches a decade. The rise wouldn't be evenly distributed because, as Tedesco points out, the Greenland ice sheet is so massive it exerts its own gravitational pull, tugging water toward it. As the ice sheet melts, this pull will weaken, and so, counterintuitively, the rise will be greater farther away from Greenland's shores. I'm not sure I will have the chance to visit the Greenland ice sheet again. This makes me sad to think about, as it is perhaps my favorite place on Earth. But flying off to see the ice sheet only helps hasten its demise. Tedesco and Alberto Flores d'Arcais have done a wonderful job evoking the ice sheet's magnificence and fragility. I think in the future I may be better off staying home with a good book, like this one. Elizabeth Colbert has been a staff writer at The New Yorker since 1999. Her journalism has garnered multiple awards, including a 2006 National Academy's Communication Award for her 3-part series, The Climate of Man, which investigated the consequences of disappearing ice on the planet. She is the author of The Prophet of Love, Field Notes from a Catastrophe, and The Sixth Extinction, for which she won the Pulitzer Prize for General Nonfiction in 2015. She received the Blake Dodd Prize from the American Academy of Arts and Letters in 2017. Prologue. It's dawn. The sun rises in front of the Monte Vergine, bathing the mountain in light and dispersing the mist hanging in the valley that cradles the sleeping city of my childhood. This part of Irpinia lies still between the peaks of Partenio and Terminio, two colossi of roads of this area that stand guard over a culture and a place that are unchanged by time. These are not the immense mountains of America, which are impossible to fully behold. Neither are they the Dolomites, with their unattainable, impenetrable heights jutting mysteriously into the clouds. These are mountains on a human scale, a dimension that has kept intact the flavor of the land, the smell of its pastures, and the harshness of its landscapes. A harshness that calluses hands and toughens the spirit, and that has forged the thoughts and actions of a Proto-European people, the Irpini, from Irpus, Oscan for wolf. 90% of my gene pool originates from this place. These were the mountains I dreamt of climbing as a child, impatient to get to their summits, to challenge both myself and the mysteries they held. I have no doubt this is where I learned the slow, geological pace that affords me time to absorb my surroundings, to observe, to contemplate the sights before me and assimilate them within me. Neither the sea in Naples, where I moved to study engineering, or Brazil, where I have lived on several occasions, ever subsumed or weakened this bond. When I used to gaze, in awe, at my local mountains, eyes sweeping up from base to summit, I never imagined I would one day set foot on the glaciers of Antarctica, walk in the Rocky Mountains, trek the Alaska Plains, explore the forests of Finland, or tread on volcanic rock lying over ice in Iceland. Despite being from southern climes, when I started my Ph.D., I found myself studying something that belongs to a very distant world. First snow, then ice. It was in those years, now almost 2 decades ago, that I made my first visit to the glaciers of the Dolomites and felt irresistibly drawn to the endless, solitary expanses of white as I looked out at them from high up on the summit. In awe at the dazzling landscape before me, the irrevocable, unalterable decision to see the ice sheets of Greenland for myself was already firmly cemented in my head and heart. Several years later, this decision was to become a reality, and little by little, year after year, one expedition at a time, that same country became part of my life. It was the start of a long and personal voyage of exploration of a world that, after so many years, never ceases to astonish and to fascinate me, as it did the very first time I laid eyes on it. It must have been fate. Chapter 1. The Origins of Ice. I'm first to wake up. I often am. The silence surrounding me is absolute. There's something special about night in the Arctic. I'll never forget the first time I slept here. The emotion of being camped on the immense ice sheet, the light of the sun that never sets, a constant companion for people in this job. I've always woken up early and find it almost impossible to go back to sleep once I'm awake, a habit that intensified when I became a father and has never left me since. The first trial of the day when living on the ice is to get dressed. It's not as easy as you might think. To prepare for the world outside the tent, you need to be wearing multiple layers. Some call it dressing like an onion. You don different layers of differing weights, each one serving a different purpose. For example, a base layer closest to the skin, intermediate layers, then an outer layer to provide protection from the wind. It takes a serious degree of body contortions. The tent is only 1.5 meters high, so every movement has to be carefully coordinated. I rock on my back to pull up my trousers, sit cross-legged for upper body layers, and then attempt to slide on 2 pairs of thick socks, which is difficult because my now exposed feet are usually like blocks of ice by then. Then there's the golden rule: no cotton. Clothes keep us warm because of the way they trap warm air next to the skin. But the problem with cotton is that once the clothes get wet, the pockets of trapped, warm air in the fabric fill up with water and don't protect you anymore. Like how, when you're out walking and start to sweat, a cotton top will soak up the sweat like a sponge and make you feel cold, since your initial body temperature was warmer than the temperature of the air outside, which is very much the case in Greenland. Once cotton clothes are wet, they no longer provide the necessary insulation, which is why we always make sure we bring things made of insulating fabric, either wool or a synthetic material. I scooch over to the zipper on the tent door. I have to be extra careful not to wake my travel and research companions. Anywhere else, the metallic whoosh of a zip opening would be almost inaudible. Not here. On the ice, even the tiniest of noises is amplified. Our tents are of the standard camping variety, known in the trade as four-season. They're light and go up in less than 20 minutes. The outer layer is waterproof to protect us from the rain, which does actually fall in Greenland. Many people think it's cold inside the tents, but generally speaking, that's not the case. When the sky's clear, the hot Greenland sun warms them up so much, we have to open them at night to let some cool air in before we go to sleep. It's worse in the middle of summer when the sun never sets. As I mentioned before, there's an unearthly hush around our camp. The only source of noise pollution, if we can call it that, is the whistling of the wind, which sometimes blows in a steady stream, sometimes in bursts. I finally managed to pull the zipper down, and to my ears, it sounds nothing short of an explosion. That's to be expected, though, when you think that sound is the transmission of pressure waves arriving in the ear and encoded by the brain. Since the air is so rarefied in Greenland, and there are no other sources of noise, ordinary sounds are perceived in a completely different way, and with an entirely different timbre. Or maybe it's exhaustion and auditory hallucination, or just the cold playing tricks with our senses. I crawl out on my knees, pull myself onto the waterproof mat outside the door, and sit up. Time for one last effort, to get my boots over the woolen socks that are too thick but essential. I'm tired already. Tired yet excited at the prospect of what lies ahead, aware that we only have the objects we brought with us to overcome every obstacle and to deal with every situation that might present itself. When you are in the middle of the ice sheet in Greenland, there's no stopping by the local supermarket or hardware store if you're missing a screwdriver or need a ball of string. I can't tell if the others are awake. The only sound coming from the tent is the rhythmic susurration of people breathing. Last night was one of the kind I call interesting, when someone wakes up and then wakes you up to fire a question at you, talk about an idea, or, as happens more frequently, is alarmed because of something they think they heard. It was Patrick's turn this time. Patrick was one of my PhD students. He had never been out of New York, and had gleaned his knowledge of Greenland purely from satellite data and models. I invited him to join our team to give him a well-deserved opportunity to grow further as a professional in the field, and also to give him first-hand experience of the ice. I truly believe that if you're studying this immense and magnificent ice mass, you have to see it for yourself, at least once in your life. It must have been around 3 a.m. when Patrick woke me. He seemed on edge and wanted to know if I'd heard the loud noise, like a thunderclap from the ice below us. "Whatever you need, just give me a shout, even if it's the middle of the night," I glibly reassured him when we'd landed. He'd taken me at my word. I tried to put his mind to rest, explaining that the ice often creaks, and that given the absence of any other noise around us, it's easy to imagine things. What we normally hear, though, are muffled thuds, like something splitting beneath us. The noise an enormous stone would make when it lands with a thud on mountainous terrain. I suggested he go back to sleep, with the reassurance that there was nothing to worry about. Not that I was wholly convinced either. Clearly, when you're deep in the Arctic, you shouldn't rule anything out, no matter how small and seemingly insignificant. A few minutes after my chat with Patrick, I heard it too. The noise he'd been talking about. It was the ice, flowing powerfully and inexorably beneath us at speeds, in summer, of up to about half a mile a day on the top layer. In layman's terms, that would be like pitching your tent outside the Empire State Building at night and waking up the next morning in Madison Square Park. Patrick had touched a nerve, though, and I couldn't get back to sleep, partly because I was worried and partly out of excitement. My muscles were tensed, ears pricked, waiting for a sound, any sound, however small and inaudible, like I was listening to a dinosaur's breathing with a stethoscope, only in my head. Not many people know that the ice moves. There's a common perception that the ice in Greenland is static, motionless, inanimate, in other words, when it's anything but. Pantare, the ancient Greeks taught us. Everything flows. Even ice masses, like dense rivers, move under their own weight. The flow slows in winter, when it's colder and the ice less fluid. But in summer, it's like driving downhill on a wet road. No amount of braking can stop the forward motion. In the warm season, meltwater seeps through cracks and fissures in the ice, accelerating flow rates when it reaches the rock below the sliding ice. I think about this as I look down at my boots, feet tucked safely inside. These aren't the boots I'll wear for our excursion later. They're knee-high and ideal for camp life, but not for trekking. The padding inside protects your feet at temperatures of up to negative 104 degrees Fahrenheit, negative 40 degrees Celsius. Not my feet, though. They're having none of it. They're cold from the minute I leave the tent in the morning until I get back at the end of the day. "You must be used to the cold by now," people often say to me. "You probably don't even notice it." Actually, the opposite is true. I'm a fairly slender build and don't have the mass I need to retain body heat. On excursions, we wear either hiking or Arctic crossing boots, which are sturdier and provide more ankle support to protect us from sprains. But the flip side of this is that they offer slightly less protection from the cold. Once outside, I sink into the folding chair near the tent door and think how perfect a hot cup of coffee would be right now, but also how I should probably wait until everyone else wakes up. My mind drifts again, as if I'm still half asleep. I think about how impossible it is to quantify or put a price on the good fortune I have. I can think of no better way to describe it. To be looking out at this stunning landscape in such profound stillness, surrounded by snow and ice. If you've never been to the Arctic, then there are a few things that would no doubt surprise you on your first visit, even just at first glance. What I'm looking at now is anything but mundane or flat. Snow dunes, a few meters long, desert-like, line up in parallel with the wind direction. You have to pay attention to things like this when putting up the tents. If you get them in the right position with respect to the wind, it can stop them from filling up with snowflakes, glistening and lining the tent floor with a fine sheet of delicate diamonds. The glimmer reminds me of the huge waves I saw surfers ride in Hawaii, or crashing on the beaches of Rio de Janeiro. The sparkle comes from the snowflakes fracturing when they hit the ground, split by the wind and other factors into tiny shards that then scatter randomly. The snowflakes, or what's left of them, behave like a multitude of minuscule mirrors strewn over the surface, reflecting the sunlight in all directions. That's why they seem to glimmer. In awe, I continue to gaze out. A veil of wind-borne snow is painting circular patterns across the surface, reproducing the gusts and whirls of the glacier breeze. It's as if there's an artist standing behind me, adding details to a painting as I watch. Someone who has dotted color at various points on the horizon, then decided to fan it out using their brush like a spatula. The turquoise sky, uniquely turquoise on account of the thinner air and lower humidity than southern latitudes, provides a backdrop for my meandering mind. It's a majestic color, and despite lacking the force of rain-packed clouds over the English countryside, or the sudden violence of an equatorial storm, it has a quiet power, like a gigantic wave of color. It is majestic yet motionless, aware of its own vastness and strength, but with no need to flaunt it. The enormity of the sky is determined by the vastness of the mass it embraces. The two elements, sky and ice, share the same space, totalitarian in their chromatic supremacy, leaving no room for anything but blue and white. I have a flashback. Images spring to mind of when I was flying back in a helicopter from my first trip to Greenland. After endless weeks of white, when I saw the green, the reds, and the full rugged tundra color palette again. That's when I realized, when I felt as if my time on the ice had been spent speaking and hearing only a few words, as if someone had cut away part of my chromatic vocabulary and part of me with it. The desolation of the ice before me is a pleasant one, infusing me with a sense of peace and tranquility. Still halfway between sleep and wakefulness, I let this feeling wash over me, like I'm bobbing in a lifeboat on a calm sea. Time here is different. It's more like the geological time of my homeland. I don't need a watch. I can't and don't need to catch up on the latest news or download new music. The passage of time, as we normally think of or experience it, has no meaning here. The ice is an elephant. I am a mere cell. Here in Greenland it has taken thousands of years to form. Snow falls year after year, never melting in the summer, becoming buried under yet more layers of snow. Greenland was created and has developed through the action of millions of minuscule particles, snowflakes that pile up with the passing years, snow layers compressed under their own weight, forcing out the air until they turn into ice with that all-important density, a dogma for scientists like me, 917 kilograms per meter cubed. 917. The magic number. Less than 10% of the structure of glacial ice is air. All the rest is water in a solid state. Ice formation is a constant process that has been taking place for decades, centuries, millennia. When ice reaches a critical mass, it begins to flow, literally under its own weight. Gravity, that mysterious natural force, sculpting the world around us yet again. It takes much less to melt the ice. Nature's slow, painstaking labors can be reversed in a day, maybe even less. The vast icy expanse moves at a natural pace, heedless of us, of contemporary society, of humans dashing around like crazed cells, trying to take everything in before the next digital distraction, the next screen, grabs our attention. We human beings are tiny, but with our greenhouse gas emissions and global warming, we're like a virus attacking everything and everyone, and have managed not only to threaten the mighty Greenland, but also to bring it to its knees. At the center of this polar landmass, At its thickest point, the ice can be up to 2 miles, 3 kilometers deep, thinning out to around a few hundred meters along the coast where it flows into the ocean, like a river of opalescent lava. The deepest sections of ice are also the oldest, and the ones that have been compressed under the most weight, resting on the granite bedrock for thousands of years. Little by little, as the ice slides toward the ocean, preparing to return to its origins, it melts on the surface, releasing a part of its memory into the ocean. Layers of ice deposited at different times become distorted, undulated, fused together by the constant movement, and the surface ultimately merges with the deeper roots. I go over the last few details of our experiments in my mind, reminding myself of the things I must do and those I must not. We're preparing to collect data that will help us understand the impact of climate change on the rate of the ice's melting and, in turn, what role this plays in rising sea levels. We'll be studying not only the impact of rising temperatures on the formation and evolution of the systems of meltwater rivers and lakes, but also how the sun and the fact that ice is getting darker are a key part of this. We know, though, that Greenland is more than all this, and another reason we're here is simply to savor it, to absorb it, and to get to know it. I gaze and dream and think. I think back to the southern Italy of my youth, a rich, harsh land where roots run very deep for those who still live there, or for those who maintain strong bonds despite living elsewhere for many years. My roots are the linchpin of my existence. They define me and influence me, even in the U.S., my adopted home, the place I've laid my hat for several years now. Roots provide an anchor, restraining, circumscribing, restricting. They give us stability, but they also sometimes make it more difficult to effect real change. They shape us slowly, bit by bit, as if mimicking the gentle rhythm of sap, bringing forth a tree from the inert soil, nurturing its branches, growing its leaves. The sluggishness of the morning, the accumulated fatigue, and the longing, now more in need, for coffee, make me feel hallucinatory for a moment. I imagine roots reaching deep into the icy ground, roots that move, following the flow of the ice and the flow of time. On this cold morning in the Arctic, I feel at ease with this train of thought. After all, I also moved a long way from my place of birth, a move that was necessary for new branches and new leaves to sprout, the lifeblood of their roots giving them the strength they needed to grow and mature, the spores and seeds around them helping them grow stronger and reach further. In this way, ice and its static vitality reminds me a little of myself. It reminds me of all of us. Chapter 2. Mother Greenland. The water for the coffee is nearly boiling. I open the airtight tin holding the precious ground beans, and the pungent aroma fills the air inside our kitchen tent instantly, helped by the lack of competition from any other odors, unlike in the city. I spoon coffee into the French press and fill it with water, and brown bubbles foam on the surface. I put the lid on, wait a few minutes, then push on the plunger, forcing the mesh disc down to the bottom, separating the grounds from the fragrant black liquid. The others join me, Patrick, Ian, and Allison, who are British, close friends and hydrology experts, then Christine, who's studying extreme life on glaciers. Coffee is a kind of ritual, or the poetry of life, as the great Eduardo de Filippo described it in the legendary balcony scene in Oh, These Ghosts. We have a selection of things we brought with us in the helicopter to eat with our coffee: powdered milk to mix with more water, cereal, dried fruit, walnuts, and an assortment of options ranging from brown sugar to blackberry jam. The further we get into our expedition, the more...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?